Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 172.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you have decided to be here today because here's the thing. When you are out there building your business, building cash flow, writing those offers, getting that real estate accepted and putting it out to productive use, you know what you're doing? Yeah, that's right. You're selling in a lot of senses. You've got to start somewhere with that sales skills. But at some point, most of us have a vision that's large enough to support something bigger than just being a salesperson for the business. And more importantly than that, we need to build a bigger business that supports the lifestyle that we want. That means you're going to have to take a journey. You're going to have to take a journey from being a salesperson all the way to the CEO, running a team, making things happen, figuring out how to grow this monster that you started that was once just a little baby and an idea. And guess what? Today's guest is an expert at helping individuals do exactly that. Why? Because he's done it himself. And most importantly, when someone has done something themselves, they are now qualified to help you with the same. Today's guest is none other than John Murphy. He is a results-oriented business coach and mentor to senior executives and CEOs. He's a great communicator. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to love his accent. With the broad experience, he's skilled at discussing issues that make businesses and individuals grow and thrive. One of the key skill sets that I believe that we're all going to learn and gain today is building a team. We're talking to an individual who's been able to do that for many different companies all across the globe to a very serious degree because he helps individuals understand that. Now, many of you have probably been afraid to go door to door, but he's done it, and he's gone from that all the way to the CEO of a pan-European life assurance company in Ireland. He also started his own business, John Murphy International, and in 2004 has worked worldwide across a broad range of industries. What I want you to do is I want you to take some notes, and I want you to pay attention, and let's get to know Mr. John Murphy. John, you there?
I am indeed, Jay, and listen, thank you very much indeed for inviting me along here. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'm excited that you're here. I'm excited to hear anytime someone says to me that they want to talk about leadership and that they care about that and they want to see CEOs and small business owners become more successful. So when you say that to me, it's like, yeah, I love it. So it gets me excited.
It's a great transition, isn't it? I mean, as you said there a few seconds ago, when you start off a business, you are just about selling your product, whatever the product it might be. But at some stage, if you're looking to grow, you've got to actually grow into that CEO role. And that's a very different mindset. And it's a different journey. And to a large extent, it's a different role.
Yes. And that's exactly what we want to talk about. But before we get that far, what I want to do is I want to ask you the same question that I tend to ask most individuals. Is I look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. So, you've got Batman, Robin, Superman, Wonder Woman, Black Widow. I don't know. You've got so many different superheroes out there in the comic book world. And I think entrepreneurs do, a similar thing. Superheroes, they get dressed up, they save people, they use their specific set of skills going out there to make lives better, so to speak. And I think entrepreneurs do the same thing. However, also like superheroes, before they were super, they were just, normal people who probably had an alter ego of some kind. They, before they got bit by a spider or whatever, and they were just people. What I would love to know is before you were CEO, before you were this excellent executive coach, before you were helping other individuals learn how to go out there and build and create cash flow. Who is John Murphy?
Yeah, it's kind of, gosh, it seems so long ago now. It's kind of dim and distant past. But I mean, I started, as you referenced there, I started my career in the life assurance industry a long, long time ago. And I started, to say that I started at kind of the the most basic role in life assurance company is true, because I was selling insurance door to door in Dublin.
Nice.
And it was, I tell you what, being very honest with you, Jay, people would say, gosh, that must be the most ghastly job in the world. I have to admit, it was actually one of the greatest bits of fun I've ever had in my life. Now, that's not to say it was easy, because cold calling, as you know, is not something that we all wake up in the morning and go, yippity-doo-dah, this is what I want to do all day. But I tell you, it's a great training ground, and it's a great education to actually do it face-to-face with customers, and literally face-to-face with customers, and to get that, the amount of rejection, to understand that rejection and to understand that as part of it. But you really do get to understand what makes people tick. And then, as time progressed, I became a manager. And interesting, we talk about the transition to CEO, but the transition from being a salesperson to being a manager it's much bigger than you think it is going to be. Because one of the things that you realize as a salesperson is that as a salesperson, you can be inherently selfish, because you can just decide totally to focus on selling, on yourself, and that's all you need to do. When you become a manager, you don't quite have the same luxury to be a selfish. And it takes you a little bit of time to get your head around that. So it is a significant shift. But then went through, the corporate world. And I sort of worked for a multinational, became kind of sales manager, sales director, marketing director, general manager, and ended up as CEO of that life company for quite a number of years. So, and I went through a few different companies along the way, but ending up a CEO. And that great journey, great interest. I love doing it. Corporate life is extremely good to you, as you know. The problem with it, I would probably look back in it a little bit and say I stayed probably a few years longer than I should have. I kind of knew after a couple of years being CEO that while it was the thing that I really, really wanted to do, and I was passionate about getting there, in terms of career progression, that I had got somewhat fixated that the career and the title became terribly important. And I realized when I got it that I wasn't actually, I liked the job, but I didn't love the job. And I stayed doing it for a number of years. And then I decided, well, if I was really going to be true to myself, I was going to have to go off and do my own thing and be the entrepreneur that I wanted to be deep down, and do the thing that I loved doing, because the part of corporate world that I loved was coaching and developing people and putting teams together. So hence I just transitioned into that, my business. So that's a very quick run through my own background. Got
it. So, well, there's a couple of transitions and transition points that you went over there that I definitely want to make sure that we talk about. But I want everyone to get one of the most important things. Sometimes it's not what you do, it's how you look at what you do that makes all the difference. Because I know there's a number of you who, when he said door to door, either you like choked on your bagel or you're just like, oh my God, I would never want to do that. And then you probably even had an even stronger reaction when you said it was fun. You're like, how? How is this possible? But I want you to hear what was really the important piece. It was training ground. And I totally understand. And now I've done what he's talking about. I mean, if you really want to go there, call out of the yellow page or white pages. Just pick up a foot, do that for a while, and you'll understand quickly how this can be a training ground. But I'm curious. You mentioned something about, as a salesperson, you could be selfish and only concerned about yourself for a little bit while you had the luxury of that selfishness. I'm just curious, would that same thing exist if we're talking about the journey from, sales to CEO? Wouldn't that same thing exist when I'm kind of starting out my business at the beginning?
Well, it is. And I think the point I'm making was that when you're working as a salesperson in a company, the only person that you have to take care of and the only person that you have to worry about is yourself and your own productivity. And that you're utterly focused on that. In the same way, to be very honest, I know when I started my own business, Jay, the approach that I had was that I just kind of did as many sales calls as I could possibly get. I mean, and I would run myself ragged at the very beginning because, deep down in all of us, there's that little insecurity, no matter, what you've done or what you've achieved, is when you're starting off, will this work?
Right.
Because there ain't no guarantees. And my way of kind of managing that little kind of voice that was chiming at me in my own head was said, well, I'm just going to do a numbers game in terms of I'm going to go and make as many appointments to do as many sales calls as I possibly can that I can jam into the day. And that's what I focused on uniquely at the very, very beginning. And then once I began to get a bit of traction in terms of, contracts and that, then, I began to look at other things. But I needed to have the confidence of getting the traction in terms of actually achieving the sales. And it was very much going back to my training in terms of door-to-door selling. So that's what I said. It's a great training ground for the discipline to stay at it and stay at it and stay at it, even when you're getting no after no after no.
More like especially when you're getting no after no after no. Now, you mentioned that you stayed too long. Now, having worked with a number of people as they transition, say, from the corporate world over to the real estate world or what have you, I would love for you to expound on staying too long, because I'm willing to bet that there's at least one person listening right now who probably feels like they should have left a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I mean, corporate life is very good to you. And, when you get, particularly, senior you get, you're very well paid, you're very well looked after, you're well remunerated, you've got your expense account, your first class travel, all of the things that go with it. And to a large extent, it is the classic fur-lined mousetrap, because it's very easy to get cocooned in that world. And, when I look back at the time, when I became CEO, and I was CEO for 7 years before I left, and we had grown the business and it was great and it was exciting. But I suddenly realized, hang on a second, deep inside of me, there was this little thing that always was kind of gnawing away at me could I actually do a business on my own? Because one of the things about the corporate world is that, you're playing with somebody else's money. So I thought, okay, could I do this, playing with my own money? And that, if it doesn't work, it's not just a pity or it's not just a failure, but it's going to be a financial failure to me. And so you're really putting everything on the line, and you're also putting yourself out there that people say, well, why is he doing this and why is he making this change? But I just felt it was something that if I didn't do it then, I'd never do it. And I would deeply regret not doing it. And I would look back at it now and I'd say, I probably had that feeling for about 3 years. And it really took me kind of 2 years of thinking about it, and then, a year to transition out, because I had to exit in an order, because the company, I'd no falling out of the company, and I wanted to make that transition as smooth as possible. So I agreed that I would, a 12-month transition, to get somebody else to replace me and move on and maintain the integrity of the relationship. But I just knew that I was beginning to repeat myself. Yeah. And that, this year was a little bit like last year, and next year is going to look a little bit like this year. And I know myself, Jay, I have a low threshold of boredom. And I knew that, that was creeping in, and that, and when that starts to happen, I think you actually nearly become a danger to the organization. And it is time to move on. And I do have a belief that, in the corporate world, that certainly every 5 to 6 years, somebody should be moved on from the role anyway, because I think there's only so much you can give. There's only so much that you're going to come up with. And I think it becomes a bit repetitive. So for me, I knew that. And from the day I made the decision, I have never for 1 second regretted that decision. No, that's not to say that it hasn't been tough at times. This ain't Pollyanna, right? Because as you know, building a business, it doesn't all go in a straight line. But I can tell you honestly, I've never regretted it. Never, ever regretted it.
Well, before we talk about how many trips to the pub you had to take, let's focus in on one little piece here. Is there's always this moment that like I've said before, there's always this moment in every person's life where they make that switch, they make that change. And you clearly did that because you were realizing, people like to say, I have 20 years of experience. And now I think you have 1 year experience that you've repeated 20 times. And that's two completely different things. And you're starting to feel that. Was that the actual point? Was that the catalyst? What was the catalyst that finally gave you the courage to say, you know what, I am going to do my own thing?
Well, it's interesting because all during my career, I had a kind of a one-liner that I said to everybody, and it was, the day I get bored, I'm off, right? And something, it was very easy for me to have that line because for years I wasn't bored, and it's very easy to have that one-liner, which is kind of a bit tongue-in-cheek. And it was very easy to say it. But then when I suddenly realized, actually, I am bored, then it was a case of, well, now, am I going to live up to my own mantra, or am I going to be a liar to myself? And I also felt that, I'm a great believer in that it's the totality of you. It is not just about your business, that it's not one-dimensional, that it is the totality of you that turns up for work, that is the totality of you that's at home. And when there is something out of sync, then you need to do something about it, wherever that might be, whether it be at home or whether it be at work. And I knew that I was out of sync in terms of the corporate world, and that I was beginning to really get kind of anxious in my own mind about going and proving to myself that I could take something from nothing and start it from zero and then build it up to be an entity. And the joy of it, of course, is that, doing the sort of work that I do, it's constantly evolving. It's, if you look at what the whole digital world has done to the business I'm in and loads of other businesses, the speed of change is so fast and it's so exciting. But it's more exciting when it's your own baby.
Yes. I often tell people, when people complain about, commercials on television, I'm like, the only reason you are complaining about commercials on television is because they're not selling a product you own. If it was your product, you'd be on the phone like, Mom, look, my product's on TV,
Absolutely.
And it is more exciting. Life becomes more exciting when you actually have something at stake and quote unquote at risk and in the game in that sense. So tell me, you mentioned, you alluded to it, that the success wasn't in a straight line, and I get that. What was some of the things, how do you go from CEO to, at what point do you decide, what business am I going to do? How does this thing get started? There's gotta be a story in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I did make the decision to leave before I made the decision what I was going to do. So, that was the order. Awesome. I made the decision. That's awesome. I did make the decision I was going to leave, and then it was a bit like, okay, well, now there's that bit of the problem sorted. Now the next bit is, so now what am I going to do? And I went through kind of various iterations, and it really, and it's like, as you know these things, Jay, sometimes there are things that are right in front of you and you don't see it. And and when I looked at it, and I said I stayed a few years in corporate life, but I also did enjoy a lot of things in corporate life. I would never criticize it or knock it because it was good to me and I enjoyed it. And I decided, okay, well, what were the parts of corporate life that I really, really enjoyed doing? And I loved the kind of the strategizing. I loved managing people. I loved coaching people. I loved putting a team together and making, how to figure out the makeup of a team and the dynamic of a team, how to create a culture in a team, how to get a team to really form together and work effectively together. And then I thought, well, hell, why don't I just do that as a business? Since that's the bit I love and that's the bit that I've got the passion about. And that's precisely what I did, and went out and started doing it. My biggest fear, I'll be honest with you, Jay, the biggest fear that I had is because I came from a corporate financial services background, my biggest fear was that I would get pigeonholed into financial services. And not that I have anything against financial services, but I really didn't want to get pigeonholed. I've always had a fear in my life of being labeled as one thing. And because I think there are more dimensions to us than one. And I really had a fear of doing it. So I very purposely did not go back into the network that I had in the industry that I came from to sell business. And I went to completely different industries. And my first big client was in the pharmaceutical industry. And that was a catalyst for me, because then I wasn't just financial services, and this could apply, and the job was a good success, and it just went on from there.
So, share with us, what are some of the industries that you've actually now managed to go into, and specifically, if you can, the client, some of the clients that you've been able to assist?
Well, I mean, it's really actually quite a broad range in terms of industries. And I mean, I mentioned kind of pharmaceutical there, and I've worked with Johnson & Johnson. I've worked with Pfizer. I've also worked in mobile phone with Vodafone. I've worked with the Irish Tourist Board. I've worked with estate agents. I've worked with technology companies. I've worked with advertising agents and town planners. So, I mean, I could go right across. It's a very wide. I've worked with a chain of garden centres and pet stores, and a group of pharmacies. Financial services are in there as well. But it's really been kind of right across the gamut. And to me, the issue is not the industry. Because the issues that I deal with in terms of efficiency as CEO, in terms of being focused on the right things, in terms of strategy, and in terms of leadership and making a team work together, they straddle any industry. I mean, you can do it in a hedge fund company, which is high tech financial services, to a retail company that's selling pet food. It makes really no difference, kind of in between. The issues are the same, because at the end of the day, we have got people working together, and it's my work is all about the people.
Indeed. I mean, I'm even at a very successful Girl Scout cookie stand, it would still apply. I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I guess then with that, because now you've had the viewpoint to look in. A lot of what it doesn't really matter to the industry. We got that, but I'm guessing you see similar habits that lead to organizations getting to where they need to go or grow. And I'm sure you see certain habits that lead to organizations not getting there as well. What would be those things that you see that are commonplace in either area? All right. Well, as you know, habits make the world go round, the good ones, the bad ones, the ones that you wish you didn't have, and the ones that you are still trying to develop. Maybe you have a habit of coming over here for the podcast, which is great. Here's another habit I want you to develop. I want you to go over to Rate, Star, and Review. Star, Rate, and Review. Star, Rate, and Review the podcast for an opportunity to be entered into the prizes that we give away on Monday. Right now, we are giving away a cash flow board game to the lucky winners. So if you star, rate, and review, and once you star, rate, and review, you are always perpetually entered into any and everything that we give away later. So make sure that you go star, rate, and review the podcast. Now, with all that being said, I'm sure one of the things that you want to do is get back to the interview.
Well, one of the things that one of the areas that I think is a big challenge for many companies, and is having clarity about who their target market is. And for many companies, when I go into them, they can be a bit, it can be a bit broad and not specific enough. So clarity around target market and what it is that you bring to that target market that makes you stand out and unique. And I don't mean unique in the sense that you're the only person in the world who does it, but actually what is it about you that actually makes you stand out in that market? And I think from a customer-facing perspective, companies in general, it's a generalization, but in companies in general don't spend enough time being really focused on who their ideal client is. And there is a kind of an inbuilt fear that if I'm too specific, I'm going to narrow it down, and I'm not going to be sufficiently inclusive. And to be honest with you, the opposite is the case, is the truth. Because the old story is the riches in the niches, and that's very, very true. And the clearer focus you have on either the sort of organizations or the sort of people that you deal with, then the better it is for you. Then people can identify with who you're dealing with. The other thing from an organization perspective, and I don't want to sound corporatey about this at all, but people do think of these things in terms of the corporate world. Being really clear about the vision and the mission and the values that you have is hugely important. And I'm not talking about, when you go into organizations and you see kind of the mission statement written in the reception area. I'm a tad cynical about that, I must admit, because that tends to be, my experience has been that the more organizations that have got it written in reception, the less they actually live it for some peculiar reason. But it's because it's something that they want the outside world to see, but they don't actually live it inside. Yeah. And I'm a great believer is that you've got to be clear about your vision, your mission, and your values, and the key elements of your strategy, because that's the context for every decision that you make day in, day out. And unless you've actually got clarity on that, then you don't have the context, and that's what causes misalignment. Because people are not misaligned, generally speaking, people are not misaligned because they want to be difficult, or they want to be Machiavellian, or they want to be contrary, or anything like that. They're actually misaligned out of lack of information and lack of clarity. And if you want to drive your business forward, and you've got a team of people that you are looking to get them to build the business with you, you have got to get that alignment absolutely bang on. And that alignment will only come if they're clear about their vision, clear about the mission, clear about the core values, and clear about the elements of the key elements of the strategy. And you can't over communicate it. And very often you come across an organization and say, we did that last year. We did the strategy, or we did the values, or we did the vision. We did that last year, so we don't need to do it again. Sorry, you do. You need to come back. You need to repeat it. You need to talk about it time and time again, because that's the only way you're going to make it live. So they will be some of the things. I think the clarity around the target market is something that's really important. And I think companies do miss out on that. But then the second part would be about getting that vision and mission, core values and strategy really, really crystal clear to everybody in the organization. And that helps to gain the alignment. And once you get alignment, you have a much better chance of building trust within an organization. And trust is kind of one of these words that's bandied around a little bit. But trust in terms of, when I talk about trust in terms of an organization, it's the trust, Jay, that I can say to you, Jay, I don't understand this, or I'm stuck, or I've made a mistake, or I'm overwhelmed, or I've got a problem. And this is not going to come back at me at some stage. And it's the trust that I can say that to you and to my other colleagues, and there's going to be support there to actually make it right. The opposite of that is I stay in my silo, and I kind of stay here and I say, well, I'm not going to put my hand up and say, I'm struggling, because that's going to be a sign of weakness. And as sure as God, I'll get shot dead at some stage in the future if I do that, right? So that's what I'm talking about, getting that alignment, building that trust. And that's what actually makes an organization healthy and successful.
Now, but for today's entrepreneur, it's not like you can go get an ebook on this. How is one to learn it?
How you learn it is, to be honest, a lot of the time I spend a lot of time in coaching CEOs and business owners in kind of really helping them to create this atmosphere and this ambience within the business. And part of that is actually coaching the owner and the CEO to coach his own people. Because trust is built through relationships. Trust is built over time. You can't hand me trust. So, and trust is earned. And the way you get trust is not by managing people, but by coaching people. And coaching people, because coaching people is for their benefit, which ultimately would lead to the benefit of the company. But what you're doing is you're coaching them to be better at what they do. And when you have an organization that's got a culture of coaching, then that organization will build trust with each other. But it starts with the CEO. He or she has got to make the commitment that they are going to coach their people. And that's the way you start building that relationship. And that's the way you start building the trust. And, because many entrepreneurs, have not perhaps had the experience of coaching, it's something that I do spend quite a bit of time with individuals, showing them how to do it. It ain't complicated, but there's a way of doing it and there's a way not to do it. And people understand the difference between managing and coaching. And I suppose probably the simplest differentiation is I would always say you manage things, and you coach and lead people. And it's in that coaching and leadership side, that's where you build that trust.
Got it. So if I was starting today, like if I was trying to get my business off the ground and I wanted to, or maybe I've written a few offers already, or and I've got some properties going, and I'm beginning to build the business, but I see there's a need. I mean, for most, especially in the real estate world, there's a quick need. It is huge, really, really fast, where we can get overwhelmed with all of the details and things that need to be, properly handled. I'm curious to know if you have a priority list. Right now, let's say if I'm a one-woman band, and I'm ready, to bring in my string section and maybe some bass drums, something, anything. What is going to be, in your opinion, that very first person that I need to try to recruit to the team?
The first person that I would recruit is if you're looking at, okay, you're starting completely on your own, and you've opened the doors of your office, and there's just you, and that's it.
Yeah.
The first person that I would take in would be an assistant to you, right? So that we can actually take some of the administrative work and some of the allowing you to focus on what is then going to be the most important thing, which is going out about client acquisition. The next role that I would look to fill in, if the person that you can bring in can grow into that role, is putting together the processes and the systems that you need in the business. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about high tech, but I mean, there's got to be processes and systems in a business that you map out all of the things that you do. You map out all of the interactions. So I would say that is the next piece, that you actually start mapping out all of the processes so they're very, very clear, so that as you then bring people in, they have now got these roadmap of processes that they can take on. Then you're probably looking at taking on somebody on the marketing side who can come in and start kind of expanding your market and expanding your reach, doing things like your social media. If you're doing podcasts like you and I do, where you're promoting it, how you can actually get a wider reach. And then after that, you're probably looking at taking on somebody on the financial side. That could be outsourced. I mean, all of these can be outsourced, but I mean, that can be something that you actually bring in on a temporary basis. But there are the orders that I would do it in, because you've got to go from doing all the things yourself, and before you can start handing things over to other people, you've got to map out those processes. So I would be getting somebody in to work out, to map all of the things, all of the contact with the clients, all of the contact with suppliers, all of the contacts with, the providers of the product, or providers of different services too, so that you're actually starting to build your own little kind of manual, if you like, in the business, that everything is mapped out. And process is important. Process is very, very important in business. And, if you look at it, and you know this better than I do, but I mean, you look at it in terms of businesses, is actually, for example, you're invoicing out. So your accounts, the accounts going out, the accounts coming back in. And most businesses actually go pear-shaped for lack of cash flow, not lack of profit. And so, it's really important that you get those sort of things in place early on, so that you've got those nailed. And then you just bolt on as you need.
Now, I'm going to ask the question that I know someone will scream at me if I don't ask. If I'm just starting, though, and, maybe I got a few things going, and as we said, it's just me, how do I pay for that person, that first person, and how do I get over that hurdle that where's the money going to come from for that person?
Well, I think that there's lots of different ways you can do it. The way that I think that there's a lot of outsourcing that you can do. And I'm a great believer in virtual teams. I have my own virtual team. And I started with my first virtual assistant a number of years ago. And that started off a couple of hours a week at a very, very low rate. And that role has just grown to be a full-time. So you're talking about really, really small money. And at some stage, you've got to make the decision, is it worth my while doing these number of tasks? Because if you put a price and a value on your hourly rate, then if you can get somebody to do that for a fraction of it, then that's a good investment. And you can start off at a really, really low rate and get a virtual assistant for, a small number of dollars every week. You'll get a couple of hours. And then as you build it and as you grow it, then you can grow. I would say that the decision not to do that is counterproductive. And while it might seem in some ways intuitive, I believe it's counterintuitive, but it's certainly counterproductive, because you will always, it'd be a bit like driving the car with a handbrake on. You're never going to get to full throttle if you're going to hold yourself back all the time by not investing. So you don't have to make the big call of going out and hiring somebody as a full-time staff member with all the add-on costs to that. You can, in this day and age, with the technology available to us, you can actually get virtual assistants at a relatively small amount of money, and you can just do it for a couple of hours and a couple of hours. And let's face it, if you know what your hourly rate is, and you can get somebody to do that work at 10% of that hourly rate or whatever the percentage is, then you're going to make that self-financing very, very quickly.
And, I had to ask, because I'm asked that question all the time. Yeah. And I wanted to hear what your answer would be, and I'm smiling over here because I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how I say it. And I'm like, yes, there's no way around it. Unless you choose to stay small, and that's a choice. If you want to stay there, that no problem. However, most of us have a dream that's larger than ourselves, and we have to find a way to give it expression. And the only way that I've found to do that is to go through the whole team and to make that happen. So I've got a question for you now. Yeah. Because I know what happened to me the first time I tried to, do the virtual assistant thing and getting team members on. It's suddenly that was the realization that the role and what my responsibilities were changing. I mean, and they were changed, and they didn't change slowly. They changed so quickly, it was ridiculous. My question to you is, what's the best way to make that type of transition into that leader?
Well, it's not an easy one. I mean, being honest, it isn't easy, and I don't think it's been easy for any of us to make that transition. And I think that you've got to be able to stand back from it and kind of realize, well, where are you going to add most value to the organization? And it may not be in this situation kind of doing what you did when you started, which was going out and being the one and only salesperson for the organization. Now you've got a very different role, and you've got to stand back from it. And to a large extent, I think that's where guys like myself come into play, where you can be you can't be the kind of the objective voice that is challenging you. I know when I became CEO, when you're CEO of a company, as you know, Jay, who do you talk to? Who do you actually go and say, I'm really worried about this, or I'm really concerned about this? You can't always go to your own team. You can at times, but you can't always go, or you can't share everything. And you want to have somebody that you can deal with that's a bit at arm's length, who can be objective, understands what you're going through, and understands the challenges and understands the issues that you face. But you have somebody that is going to just challenge your own thinking. And that's what I think you do need to have, to find a mentor, to find a coach, somebody that really, really can challenge your thinking, and to make sure that you can be a sounding board and, can really, you can utilize them to make sure and validate the decisions that you are making. It's not that you're actually abdicating that to somebody else, but you're just making sure that you are road testing them and that you are proofing them before you actually make them. And I think we all need that help. I mean, I have my own coaching business, but Jay, I have my own coach as well.
Right.
Because I'm not going to be my own best coach because I'm not objective about me. So I need to have that sort of resource that I can tap into, say, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? And then there's the challenge. Well, how does that fit with your vision? Is that not slightly different to the direction you're going in, or is that not going to take you to a different place? And I think that's where you need to have that connection. None of us are islands. We can't do these things on our own. And, if you look at all of the successful people, they would all, make reference to the fact they've got a mentor or a coach that they work with. And I think you need to have that person who's got that bit of distance between them and the business, and that can be the objective challenger. It's not to tell you what to do, but it's to challenge what you're doing and to make sure that the things that you're doing are the right things and focusing on the right things. But you've got to actually realize that, when you actually take on the role, you've got to learn to delegate. And for some people, delegating is difficult. And one thing you've got to do is delegate and let go. And the letting go can be the hard bit. And it's realizing when because very often we don't. I had this conversation with somebody recently. He said, oh, no, I'm delegating. And then I had a conversation a few minutes later when he was talking about how he was doing things. I said, no, you're not delegating. You're saying you're delegating. But actually, all you keep doing is butting your nose in. Because if you're delegating, you've got to trust that person is going to do the job. And also trust and know that they will do it slightly differently than you will. Or maybe quite differently than you will. But right. Just because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong. So it is that thing about letting go. And for many, many entrepreneurs, the letting go is a big challenge. And I think that's where a mentor or a coach can help you.
Yeah, I'm sure there's at least one person who's nodding their head right now going, that's me.
And listen, we've all done it. We've all done it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's your baby. It's your idea. No one's going to care about it as much as I do. They're not going to take care of my baby the way, you know what, they're not. And that's okay.
And also you've got to realize that, I know that, when I was CEO, my pet area was two pet areas, sales and marketing. Right?
Yeah.
For me to butt out from the sales director and the marketing director was always a challenge to me. Because I always wanted to throw my tuppence halfpenny worth in.
Yeah.
Right? And I knew that if I kept doing that, they'd only ever do the job to please me and not do the right thing.
John, yes, I still have not managed to extricate myself from the sales and marketing. For that's exactly I've tried a couple of times and it just I haven't figured that one. I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm working.
It's a toughie. It's a real toughie. I know that from my own experience, and I used to have to bite my lip if I was talking about the actuarial department. They could do what the hell they liked.
Totally, all day long. I don't really care. Yes.
Yeah, as long as I get the results at the end, I didn't care how they did it.
Right.
But the marketing, I had a view about how marketing and how the sales division should be run. And I knew that for the marketing director and the sales director, I really was a pain in the neck.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, everyone's learning that we're all still a work in progress and that we can grow. Now, I'm sure that there's a number of people who are probably they've nodded their head a lot. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. Maybe John can help me. Tell us a little bit, if we wanted to find out more about you and some of the things that you're doing, what would be the best way for us to track you down?
The best way, you can go to my website, which is www.johnmurphyinternational.com, or my email, which is john@johnmurphyinternational.com. I'd love for any listeners to get in touch. Be happy to if they just reference you and say they heard it here, I'd be happy to have a chat with them. There's plenty of information in there. There's blogs, there's podcasts, there's quite a bit of content that would be useful to them there. If they sign up, then they'd get future emails from me. So I would, that is just really about helping people, helping leaders, helping business owners to build their business and to thrive. And also, I brand my podcast Winning at Business and Life, because I believe that it's not just about success in one part of your life, it's success in all parts of your life. And that balance is hugely important to me.
Agreed.
But I'd love to hear from them. Be delighted.
Now, one more thing, one last question here. There's likely a number of people right now who are hearing, us talk, And they have their own idea. Maybe they've been thinking for a couple of years going, maybe I should do something on my own. And they could be standing in front of the superhero store right now, ready to pick out their own cape and outfit and want to put it on, but are still hesitating just a little bit. They, still have that nagging, will this work, in the back of their head. What would you say to that person?
The easy thing to say is just go and do it, but that's a bit trite. But what I would say is that at the end of the day, that is what you have to do. And I would say if that is what is niggling at you and is nagging in the back of your head, set yourself a deadline, because you can't just suddenly decide to do it tomorrow. But you've been thinking about this for a long time. You've been thinking about this probably for quite some time. Put a deadline. If today is, the month of May, then say by the end of September or the 1st of October or whatever date it might be, I will have my own business. If you don't put a deadline, you will still be standing at that store looking at the superhero costume in 12 months' time, in 2 years' time. So put a deadline to it.
Nice. Agreed. Thank you for taking the time to invest here, sir, with the Cashflow Diary audience.
Jay, it's been a real pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really look forward to catching up with some of your listeners.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? It means get over to johnmurphyinternational.com. You know that he's got some wisdom for you that you could learn, that you could share, that you could possibly finally figure out how to expand outside your local market area, how to finally get your business online, how to finally get that idea from your garage to an actual presentation, to making it out there into the marketplace to do more business and make lives better. Guys, you got to understand, we all get there one step, one day, one journey at a time. It's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.